In this short video, I'm going to give you an overview of some assessment tools and data features available in Canvas. These tools can help you analyze student learning and make instructional decisions. So I'm going to give you a big picture overview of the features that are available and how they work. And then I'm going to ask you to pause and think about what sort of information you can gather from these different pieces of data and what instructional decisions you might make based on these data sources. So first, Canvas, like any other learning management system, gives you access to your gradebook. In the gradebook, this is the traditional view, your grades are sorted by assignment. So you can see here there are different assignments, and you can see an entire class roster of student grades sorted by assignment. Canvas will color code if things were submitted late. They'll show up red, and if an assignment has been resubmitted, that will show up yellow. So it indicates to you the timeliness of submissions. In addition to viewing your overall gradebook for the whole course, you can view a grade listing for each specific student. So if I click on a student's name in the gradebook, I can see a listing of all of the students' grades. I can either see a condensed version that just lists all the assignments and the score, or I can click on each assignment to expand the view and get additional details. So when I click on video commentary number 2, for example, I can not only see the student's score, but I can see the mean score for the whole class, and I can see the range. So I get to see the lowest score, the highest score, see how that particular student compared to the rest of the class, and I can see any general comments I left on that assignment. Now, one thing I can't see in the comments would be anything I entered in the rubric. So if I used a rubric while grading, I wouldn't see that here. But I could click on the assignment link there to go to the rubric in SpeedGrader in Canvas. So this view gives me some information about students' progress over time across multiple assignments, and it can be particularly helpful in seeing whether and how students are applying feedback over time. So if I expand several different assignments and I see that I'm giving the same sorts of feedback over time, then maybe I need to help that student apply the feedback. And you would hope to see that students are applying feedback and making those changes on multiple assignments. Now, in addition to your traditional gradebook view in Canvas, you also have what Canvas refers to as the Learning Mastery Gradebook. The Learning Mastery Gradebook applies a standards-based grading approach whereby the gradebook is sorted by outcome as opposed to assignment. So here, instead of having grades listed by assignment, what I have scores based on proficiency with particular course learning outcomes. And I'll walk you through how to go about setting this up in Canvas in just a moment. So you'll see here at the top of each column is a learning outcome. These are specific course learning outcomes that are listed on the course syllabus. And over time, throughout the semester, as students submit assignments, I use rubrics to grade their work, but also to mark how well students are progressing toward meeting these course learning outcomes. So then in this gradebook, if I move away from the traditional view and instead look at the Learning Mastery view, I can see how the whole class is doing in working towards specific outcomes. I can see how individual students are progressing in meeting certain outcomes, and I can look for trends and patterns based on this data. So the dark green is exceeds mastery, the green is meets expectations, the yellow is nearly meets expectations, and the red is doesn't meet expectations. Now, in order to have access to the Learning Mastery Gradebook, I first have to build outcomes in Canvas. So I use the Outcomes feature to create my course learning outcomes. You can have different categories or folders of outcomes, as I have in this one example, where I have a grouping of outcomes that are education outcomes and a grouping of outcomes that are humanities outcomes. Once I create these outcomes in Canvas, then I can attach them to specific assignments. And that's what allows me to track them in that Learning Mastery Gradebook. The default for each outcome is that exceeds expectations will award students 5 points, meets expectations will award 3, does not meet expectations will award 0, and mastery is set at 3 points. Now you can adjust that range if you'd like, and you can also adjust how those mastery scores are calculated. So once I've added my outcomes to Canvas, once I build those in outcomes, I can assign specific outcomes to assignments. So when I'm building assignments, I build rubrics to accompany those assignments. And within each rubric, I have some choices. So I can add criteria to the rubric that are specific to that assignment. And for this particular example, you can see at the bottom, those last 5 criteria are not course outcomes. Those are assignment criteria. Those are specific for this assignment. And those are how the grade is calculated for this particular assignment, those last 5 outcomes, last 5 criteria on the rubric. But those first 4 items on the rubric, those are from the course learning outcomes. And those aren't, in this case, they're not attached to the course grade, or to the assignment grade. So those first 4 outcomes I'm not using to calculate the grade for this assignment. Instead, those are just to help me and the student track progress toward those course outcomes. So when I'm clicking through here in Canvas SpeedGrader and clicking on these different cells in the rubric to give students feedback, the Learning Mastery Gradebook is calculating students' proficiency toward each outcome over time across multiple assignments. So the first step for me then is adding those outcomes to Canvas, then attaching those outcomes to assignments through the rubrics, and then finally I get access to this Learning Mastery Gradebook that is showing me over time how students are progressing toward outcomes as a whole class and individually. Now I can also see a specific outcomes report for each student. So when I click on a student's name in Canvas, I have access to several different reports. I'm going to show you a few of those reports now. This is known as the outcomes report. So for each individual student, I can see all of the course learning outcomes. I can see how many attempts have been made and from how many different artifacts. And I can see the student's latest score with each outcome. Now remember, these are the default scores set in Canvas. So the 3 is meets expectations, the 5 is exceeds. And I can see the student's average percent across all of the attempts. Another report I have access to for each individual student is the interactions report. And the interactions report shows me how active students have been. So I have access to an interactions report at the whole class level that just shows how when was the student's last interaction in the course site, and it shows me the student's current grade and anticipated final grade based on any assignments that have not been graded yet. And in addition to this whole class interactions report, I have individual access reports. For each individual student, I can see how often a student has viewed and interacted with different types of content in the course. I can see when each of these types of content was last viewed and how often the student has interacted with them throughout the semester. And finally, I have access to some analytics. This is again by student. So for each individual student, I can view an analytics report. This analytics report shows you activity in the course over time. So this first section, the bar graph, shows me students' activity in the course across the entire semester. So it shows page views and it shows participation. So that participation might be contributing to discussion boards, submitting assignments, and otherwise interacting with content as opposed to simply clicking on pages, the page views. The second section of the analytics report shows me communication that is measured through messages. So this is when the student and I have communicated through Canvas messages. And then finally you get trend information about student assignments and the timeliness of submissions. So you can see when student work is submitted on time, late, and when any work might have been missing. So those are the types of data reports that instructors have access to through Canvas. And I hope this has been helpful for you in thinking through the instructional decisions you could make based on these data sources.